Hey, what'd you think of that music there, Tim?
I enjoyed it. I was pleasantly surprised. At first, I thought we were going to go with something a little bit kind of classical. And then, and then the beat kicked in and I relaxed a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of chill, right?
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. I'm with it.
Well, welcome everybody to this edition of 360 Collective. This conversation is called The Sports Race. My name is Isaac Castellez. My brother Timothy Hampton is here with us tonight, and we should be joined also by the good brother Amari Dukes, who should be along shortly. So we are here tonight to talk about the influence and role and prevalence of race when it comes to a sports issue. We want to try to have this conversation in an ongoing fashion. Over the course of the rest of the year, we would like to break down a different aspect of sports. Tonight, we will start with college basketball. And the reason why we thought college basketball would be a good place to start is because of all of the interest in women's college basketball, and in particular, Caitlin Clark. So we're going to explore Caitlin Clark and the phenomenon of Caitlin Clark and her rise in college basketball in just a second. But before we do, we want to make sure to invite you, our audience, to check in with us in the comment section. Let us know what you're thinking. React to what it is we're saying, because we would like to have an interaction with you. We would like for this to be a democratic dialogue that we're all part of. So if you have a thought, if you think we're onto something or off on something, let us know in the chat so that we can react to your comments. We can build upon what it is you're saying. And if there's a topic that we're not exploring that you want us to explore, definitely let us know in the comment section so that we can get into the topic that you have top of mind. So with that said, why don't we just jump right into the first question, Tim?
Okay.
All right. So look, Caitlin Clark, she's a beast. Like, there's no denying she's a talented basketball player. She just got drafted number 1 in the WNBA draft. She broke the NCAA Division I college basketball scoring record, top scorer for both men and women. So she's taken the country by storm. She's attracted a whole new audience, a whole new demographic to college sports, probably now to the WNBA. But I'm curious to know, Tim, what your thoughts are and what our audience is thinking as well about Caitlin Clark. To what extent is her ascent and her popularity influenced by her race, by her ethnic background as a white woman? So what's your take on that, Tim? What comes to mind when you hear me ask you this question?
First I want to acknowledge that she is an extraordinary player. She's talented. I'm not, this is not a situation of she doesn't deserve the accolades that she's gotten, but it is a situation of kind of an imbalanced press coverage situation due to the fact that she's a Caucasian. Now that may rub some people the wrong way, but some names come to mind. Some names come to mind when I think of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. Those names are like Tina Marie and Jerry Cooney. Now, those are very old names, but if you think about, or if you know anything about those are people who went into arenas dominated by African Americans at that time and did very well. Jerry Cooney, they used to call him the Great White Hope. He was a boxer and he was knocking people out. Irish guy, I think. And they called him the Great White Hope. He's an openly racist kind of thing. He was working his way up to be a boxing champion. And bam, I think Larry Holmes knocked him out. The Great White Hype is what he ended up being called. Now, I'm not saying that this is the same kind of situation, but it is that kind of situation because there's a lot of hype surrounding what she is, who she is, what she's done because of what she looks like. Uh, you know, one of my better friends described it as simply a numbers game. There's more whites in the country than anybody else. So this is a big thing for that community. And they will support her just like they feel any other community would support anyone else from their community. You know, I take issue with those assertions too, you know, but I think her race has really a great deal to do with where she is in her $28 million deal with Nike. And, you know, another name comes to mind, like a Elvis Presley or a Marshall Mathers, if we want to bring it into a more modern sense. You know, it's like you've entered into an arena that is dominated by people who don't look like you and have done well, and you've amazed those who do. So you are the toast of the nation. It's really a numbers game, you know. I don't think there's anything malicious, like, you know, screw the winning team who shut her down in the championship game and, you know, held her to 8 points for 3 quarters and denied her ring, you know, and she didn't get that. And, you know, it's like they went 38-0 and 109 and 3 losses in 3 years. And it's like a great story, but we've heard none of it because Caitlin Clark scored a lot of points. I'm not mad at Caitlin Clark. It's not a point. I don't hate the player. I hate the game. And the game in this instance is white supremacy. That's it.
Yeah, I think that you're onto something there, Tim. I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. She's incredibly talented, and she is bringing something new to women's college basketball. I mean, the distance from which she shoots, the skill with which she shoots. She's arguably the best shooter in all of college basketball, period, men or women, arguably. So I think in that respect, it's worth giving her the flowers and acknowledging her as one of the best ball players in all of college basketball. I think that some of the controversy about her, though, I've heard people say, and I've even heard people, I've even read people articulating that she only got big after her feud with Angel Reese last year. You know, like there was the whole thing, like the "you can't see me," the hand gesture, and all of that. Bit of a rivalry between Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark last year when Angel Reese won the national title. And then Jill Biden wanted to invite LSU, who had won the title, and the Iowa Hawkeyes, Caitlin Clark's team, who had lost, to the White House to celebrate. And people said, well, when have both teams who competed in the title game been invited?
Yeah.
It's only ever been the winner who has gone to the White House to celebrate, right? So, and I think also the way that Angel Reese was beaten up in the media previously. I mean, here we've got a couple comments when Angel Reese taunted Caitlin Clark last year in the title game. Major talking heads like Barstool Sports, Keith Olbermann, and a slew of others. I just put a couple up here on the screen. Went at Angel Reese, even though Caitlin Clark in the previous round of the tournament, this is 2023, had taunted a losing player in a similar way, and no one said anything. And so I think it, just to add a little bit to what you're saying, you mentioned Marshall Mathers, Eminem, and so forth. You see white, in this case, a white woman who's heavily talented, deserved to be the number one pick by all accounts in the WNBA draft, but then goes right into a multi-million-dollar deal whereas Asia Wilson, who was the number 1 pick the previous year, won a national title, that broke all sorts of records herself. I mean, hasn't sniffed a deal worth $28 million, right? So that's one of the things
Excuse me.
that I think people are tapping into. And like you said, I don't know that Caitlin Clark necessarily did anything wrong. It's just the phenomenon of white people being amazed with white people who excel in whatever form it may be, whether it's rock and roll music and Elvis, rap music with Eminem, and now Caitlin Clark in basketball, right? Like when a white person excels in an area that white people are not usually represented, we tend to make a very big deal out of that. So,
Oh yeah, and that's it's a numbers game. I realize that. I posed this question to all of my closest white friends, and we had this discussion briefly, and most of them either didn't respond or said I don't know. Was the most prevalent response? I don't know. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't know. And yeah, it's a person of a different culture than the norm excelling in an area like basketball. Had this been a Chinese person, there'd be Chinese people jumping up and down and cheering and all that, I'm sure. And I have no problem with that. I think that's fine. I think what we have here in this case is a situation where she is now America's sweetheart because she came out and she did things in an arena where Black people usually dominate. And even though she didn't win the championship in either of the games that she went to, she is still America's sweetheart. And she is the one who's been propelled into stardom based on her accomplishments. But I think it's inevitable that the people in certain communities are going to look at this and say that this is really simply like the Elvis Presley, Marshall Mathers, kind of Tina Marie, kind of, you're doing so well. You sound just like a Black person, you're scoring all these points, and that's what Black people do. And previously it's always been Black people who did this. And, this is a white person doing it. Rah, 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 rah. Let's make her a superstar, well, that's the country that we live in. It's a numbers game. There's 200 and something million white people in this country, and they want to be proud of Caitlin. I mean,
let me ask you this though, Tim. What do you think is her obligation to acknowledge the privilege that she's now enjoying? I mean, when we talk about white privilege, white privilege is something that no matter how well-meaning I am as a white person, no matter what I do with my life, I will always have white privilege. There's really nothing in my life that I can do that will be free or could be divorced from my privilege as a white person.
Yeah.
In this case, it's clear that much of what she's experiencing now is simply by virtue of being a white woman, which takes nothing away from her talent. Like we both acknowledge, she's busted her behind to become the player and the talent that she is, right? What responsibility do you think she has to acknowledge that privilege and to speak on it, or to try to leverage it in a way that sort of deconstructs white supremacy or racist power?
I see that's a complex question. And I think the tongue-in-cheek response is she has the same responsibility as the white person sitting in the all-Black church staring at the white Jesus in the stained glass to deconstruct that myth, which she can't even see it. She doesn't even know how crazy it is that she's gotten all this attention, and the other team, the other players, the other coach, their journey, their hard work, their dedication, the fact that they reached the pinnacle of their profession and did all these amazing things means nothing because Caitlin Clark did well. Caitlin can't see that. She's completely blind to it. Just like that white person in the church sees the white Jesus and knows that Jesus Christ is white beyond the shadow of a doubt. Damn, all these black people in this church sitting up here worshiping this white guy, and there's nothing peculiar about that. There's nothing peculiar to Caitlin Clark about the fact that she's America's sweetheart because, you know, she worked hard and she beat all the records and she scored all the points. And, you know, damn those black people. She has a tremendous obligation, but I don't think she has the recognition of that obligation. You know, I don't think she recognizes that this is like an issue, like with so much of the country. And if she does recognizes that it's an issue with so much of the country or so many people in the country, I don't think she cares. I don't think she would.
So Max raising a good point here, Tim. He's referencing the taunting issue from the 2023 tournament. And he's making the point here that Angel and Caitlin themselves have no beef with one another. And they understood that the taunting, regardless of who was doing it or to whom, was all in the spirit of competition, right? It's all on the court. It's just what happens when you're playing in a high stakes contest of really any kind, right? And I agree. Mac makes a great point. And what I appreciated about the way Caitlin Clark handled that after the fact, she recognized that Angel Reese was getting some additional ridicule after Angel Reese, taunted Caitlin Clark, even though Caitlin Clark had done something similar in a previous game. So Caitlin Clark said, I don't know why Angel Reese is getting all of this backlash. Like, it's all just competition. I guess the question I asked before, right? Like, what obligation does Caitlin Clark have? What responsibility does she have? I guess what I would have liked Caitlin Clark to say there is that I think that there's an issue of skin color in play here. The fact that Angel Reese is getting beat up the way she is, and no one said anything about it when I did it 2 matches ago. He could have acknowledged, like, listen, it doesn't seem fair to me. It seems like there's a double standard in play here, whereas Angel Reese can taunt me and everybody, you know, gets up in arms. But when I do it, no one said anything. Or if anything, it was, oh, she's such a competitor. She's so passionate, right? So I guess that's the kind of thing that I would like for a person in Caitlin Clark's position to do. And to your point, I agree. Like, whether you live in a small town and you don't have a platform like Caitlin Clark, your obligation is to still call out white supremacy when you see it, right?
If you see it.
Right. If you see
it.
You see
You know, I don't think a white supremacist can see white supremacy, whether that is nature or nurture. You know what I mean? I think that you know, if you're not even hardcore, if you are anywhere near white supremacists in your inclination or in your worldview, and somebody says, hey, that's white supremacist right there, your first reaction is, where? Where? I don't see no white supremacy. That's just a guy punching a guy in the face who he told to comply. You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, there's a blindness to it. So yeah, if she sees it, if she recognizes it, if she knows that it's there, then yeah. But has she? I mean, you know, the taunting thing. That's something that it's amazing to me, because when you have a racist person, that racist person is going to be 10 times more offended when a black person does the exact same activity. And that could be anything. That could be road work. If you have a black crew working on the road and you have your white racist driving by and they've been held up in traffic, what are these black folks doing? Why are they out here holding up traffic? You know, but if that same road crew was white guys, they're just doing their jobs, you know, it's kind of messed up, but it's okay. I'll get to work on time. You know, it's that's the nature of white supremacy. You know what I mean? So I think if Caitlin Clark can see that responsibility or feels that responsibility exists, more power to her. But I don't think she, I think it's, I don't know Caitlin Clark. I don't know what her opinions are of the racial climate, the racial situation, or
Yeah.
But I don't know if she could even see that responsibility exists.
Yeah. So Mac is a college athlete herself. So shout out Mac for participating and sharing with us your insights. Mac has offered a lot of her thinking in the chat, and we're displaying her comments here. And so she says that any college athlete has an obligation to simply perform, right? Like play their sport to the best of their ability. That's the thing that they are obligated to do. So we thank you for that opinion, Mac. We've got a comment here from Leisha. So let's take a look, Tim. She says, while her racial identity certainly influences her popularity, so does her sexual orientation and gender expression and other identity markers. It's not just her race. It's that she is a feminine presenting heterosexual white woman and from the, I believe that's from the Midwest. Yeah, that's a great point there from Leisha. The rest of her comment, it says, from the Midwest, from a 2-parent home. It's the whole package. Yes, that's a great point. And I appreciate Alicia for pointing out that blind spot in our take. I mean, those things are absolutely true. Let's see. So, and then Mac offers another point here. The race works the same way. It's worse when it's racism. Let's remember it goes both ways. Let's also not assume she doesn't see it. Right. She might. Caitlin, she might in fact see it. That's true.
If she sees it. I didn't say she doesn't. I said if.
Right. Yeah,
she may see it, but if she sees it and if she responds to it, if she reacts to that responsibility, all remains to be seen. I'm not saying she won't. I'm not saying Caitlin Clark is racist. I'm not saying Caitlin Clark doesn't care about any of this stuff. I don't want to be viewed as that callous, angry black man, because this is not the case. My thing is that we don't immediately see her sexual orientation. We don't immediately see that she's from a 2-parent family home. We don't immediately see these other identity markers. And, you really have to understand those things on a different level before you get beyond the more obvious things, And I think the American.
Oh, go ahead, Tim. Go ahead.
I think the American tendency to categorize starts with race first, and all those things are secondary.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the next question, and also, I guess, to clarify, like our orientation as a group, 360 Collective. What we do is to confront issues of race and skin color and white supremacy as educators, as educator consultants. These are things that we strive to work with clients on, whether it's in the education world or otherwise. On our Facebook page, we promote conscious content that has an anti-racist flair to it. We also post about other things, but one of the main topics that we consistently post about on our Facebook page are issues of race and white supremacy. So when we talk about Caitlin Clark as using her privilege, it's something that we, as people who strive to be anti-racist, who strive to eradicate white supremacy, these are things that we would like for her to do. And so that's the reason why we're talking about race in the world of sports, and in this case, college basketball in particular. So we may have people with us tonight who don't know like our approach or from where we are coming on these issues. So I wanted to offer that quickly. But let's jump into the next question, Tim, because I think this next question is also an interesting one, and it is about NIL, the name, image, and likeness phenomenon. So name, image, and likeness, like the process, the institution, the policies through which college athletes can now profit from their own likeness, from their own images and their name, has forever transformed the landscape of college basketball. I'm wondering, though, what we think is the impact of race in the evolving phenomenon of NIL. And also, for those listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts about it as well. We want to continue to acknowledge and respond to your thoughts. So with this particular question, Tim, did you have an initial thought? I've got some data that I want to share, but I want to give you the first take if you have one before we look at the research.
Well, I looked into this when you presented these questions to me, and the impact of race on this phenomenon. And I think what I came up with was that no matter what, even though now the athletes are going to have an opportunity to share in this tremendous revenue stream that they create, and even though the some of the hypocrisy was kind of be decreased a bit in that they weren't paying the athletes in the past because they didn't want to compromise the integrity of the institution or the integrity of college sports by paying the athletes or compensating the athletes, even though the universities and sometimes the coaches are making millions. I think as far as the racial component is concerned, I think I'm glad these guys can share in the tremendous revenue stream that they are creating, that they can now take part in earning some of this money that they are responsible for, this income that they're responsible for generating. That's take one. Take two is that, now you have the chattel profiting off the trade too. It's still like a whole chattel system. You got these big white universities with all this money scouring the country for the absolute best athletes that they can find. And, about 7 times out of 10, those guys are black. And then you have, 10, 20 black guys on the court giving it their all, blood, sweat, and tears for a stadium full of white folks or an arena full of white folks. So I'm glad they're now sharing in all this money that's generated based on their activity. But I still see it as kind of a chattel system. It's like, we're making all this money off these guys, and nothing's really changing. It's just they're sharing in the revenue stream now, and I guess that's a positive thing, in whatever respect you look at it. I guess that's a positive thing that they're sharing in the revenue stream. Will it be equitable and fair to all the athletes in college sports? Is another question, but
and we're going to get into some perception data from the public about NIL in just a second. I want to add something though, because you said something there that I thought was quite poignant and made me think about how the NIL piece, especially in college basketball, does create more revenue sharing, more profit sharing with athletes. However, by design, what it's going to do is create more inequity in terms of the competitiveness in college basketball. Since this is a conversation about college basketball in particular, one thing that I think is worth pointing out is that over the past, say 5, maybe even going back 15 years, smaller colleges, mid-major colleges, especially in men's college basketball, have become increasingly competitive, have become increasingly successful in taking down some of the larger programs, the Kentuckys, the Kansases, the North Carolinas, right? You've got Virginia Commonwealth and other small schools. Baylor was one of the first big ones years ago. Like every year, even Loyola here in Chicago a few years ago got to the Final Four. So you have mid-major colleges that are competing now or have been competing with these big schools, and the NIL policy is going to turn the table back in favor of big schools who have donors who can offer, who can put money forward to attract the most skilled, talented players and lure them away from smaller colleges. So when we think about the move in the past few years of popular, highly ranked blue chip basketball players to enroll at HBCUs, for example, or smaller schools, NIL is going to take that incentive away, because those same athletes will choose the big schools that can offer the multi-million-dollar deals, or even if it's several $100,000. I mean, that's a life-changing amount of money for a 17, 18-year-old child, right? I go from having a sharing a bedroom with perhaps 3 or 4 siblings to now getting paid $400,000, $500,000, even $50,000, right? That I didn't have before to help my family. So NIL is going to shift the balance over time back to big schools and away from small schools. That's going to be particularly damaging in the world of college basketball. But I want to show you this, Tim. I know that you've looked at this already, but I'm interested for you to get the first chance to look over this data. So this is a representation of a study done by Dr. Tatish Intada from Amherst, Massachusetts Amherst College. And he did a study, this was in the past couple years, of public perception around name, image, and likeness. And based on his study, he assessed, I believe it was about 3,000 people in the public, to try and gather their insight, their feeling about NIL. Is it a good thing? Do you approve of it? What are your thoughts? What are your impressions? So here's what he found. First off, the blue bar represents the overall favorability rating. He found that 58% of the people that he assessed, that he surveyed, had a favorable perception of name, image, and likeness. However, when he broke that percentage down by race, he found that 70% of Black respondents had a favorable view, and only 56% of whites had a favorable view towards name, image, and likeness. And so that's one thing. But here's where it gets really deep, Tim. Check this out. He found that among whites, that white people in the survey who had increasingly negative views about Black people, not Black athletes, just Black people in general, had a stronger opposition to name, image, and likeness. The more negatively the white respondents felt about Black people, the more they opposed pay-for-play programs or NIL. Also, and this is the part that gets real deep, Tim, real deep, is that in this survey, when resentful whites were primed before answering the survey to think about African-American athletes, they were more likely on the survey to oppose pay-for-play programs than racially resentful whites who were primed to think about white athletes. You with me on this, Tim?
Yeah.
Got it. So it's shocking. That's not the right word. It's scary to me how just the thought of Black people triggered these white respondents to respond more harshly and more negatively to these survey questions about pay for play. So I want to give you the first crack at this, man. What do you think about all this, Tim?
I'm not surprised. You know, we go way back with this kind of information. I'm not surprised. It's not surprising to me, because when I look at the Caitlin Clark situation, just going back to that, they don't support success in the Black community. They don't support excellence. in the Black community. They don't support financial freedom, financial prosperity, financial wherewithal in the Black community. Uh, they would rather see people who look like them doing well as opposed to people who look like me. Why that is is could fill volumes, but it they just the status quo in this country would rather support uh, whites who fail over blacks who succeed. I think is clear. These people who they don't want to give this privilege to, this NIL opportunity to, are people who have done everything that they were supposed to do, worked hard, harder than anybody else at their so-called profession, and they still, in the eyes of the status quo, the hostile portion of the status quo, don't deserve to reap the benefits of their labor for whatever reason. And that hostility, just based on skin color alone, like you said, is quite scary. Loser culture is also very popular in the country. Causes that have failed are very popular. Confederate flags very popular.
Yeah.
Nazi flags very popular. So loser. So it's one of those situations. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a comment with my name in it. Can I read it?
Yeah.
Timothy,
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you because you're making an assumption for a group of people that you don't represent. You represent yourself and yourself only, while you are an African American male who has seen the bad parts of being African American. You have also seen the good parts of being African American. This is common. This comment also goes for anybody else of a different race who have to stop getting into those habits of continually race the driver of a topic when it's negative. I don't know. I don't consider myself a member of a racial group because race as a concept is an invention. I do see race as a prominent driving force and factor in the United States, even though it's a trash concept and it's garbage and it's been debunked for hundreds of years, the biological significance of race. But I can't ignore the fact that we live in a white supremacist society. I can't ignore the fact that racism and bigotry and hatred are ever present and ever prevalent and have permeated almost every aspect of the fabric of American society. I'm not saying that's all I see everywhere I go and I'm walking around huffing and puffing mad at every white person, because that's not the case. But I'm going to call a spade a spade. I mean, racism is racism, white supremacy is white supremacy, bigotry is bigotry.
Yeah. And so let me also jump in too, Tim. I want to share this. I want to share the screen again because I want to make sure that everyone watching is clear on what this represents, right? I mean, the phenomenon of NIL is definitely influenced by race and skin color. I mean, this study by Dr. Intada shows us that Black people have a more favorable opinion of NIL than white people, and that further, resentful whites, racially resentful whites, have an increasingly negative view of NIL when they were primed in the study to think about Black athletes versus white athletes. So Dr. Inteta was trying to isolate the perception of race when white respondents answered questions around pay for play. And so what he found was that those white respondents who had been primed before taking the survey to think about Black athletes then responded more negatively to questions around pay for play than those whites who had been primed to think about white athletes. And so the implication here is that there's a racial bias, an implicit bias at play here. That there's racism that is on the surface, where people are very openly expressing bigoted views about other people based on skin color and race. And then there's even another layer beneath that, a layer of bias that is unrecognized, that we don't even know exists when we're acting or speaking or behaving or going through our daily lives. And so Dr. Nteta, the genius about what he did was he's trying to isolate and uncover scientifically the impact of that racial bias. And that's why I described this study as so scary, Tim, is because just the thought of a black person, a black athlete, skewed and influenced the results of white people participating in this study. That's scary to me, because just imagine the average white cop who watches something on television that foments in his mind a negative view in that moment, not just in general, but in that moment, foments a negative perception of a black man or black woman or black people in general, then goes out on his beat and decides somehow, some way that he's going to do something. He's going to act that rage out. Doesn't even need to be a police officer. It can be someone's supervisor, someone's boss. It can be a judge. I mean, just imagine any person in society and the power and influence they have in the role that they play, right? So the scary part about this all is that a person's actions, their perceptions, their behaviors can be influenced just by the mere thought of a person who looks different from them. And in this case, we're talking about racially resentful whites and their perceptions of black people. So to me, that's the scary part. And like you said, it's not surprising, but it is impressive to me how this researcher was able to uncover and pinpoint implicit bias in the way that he did, because it's implicit bias, right? It's hard to locate in our daily work, in our daily thoughts and such. So that's the way that I'd respond to Mac and her thoughts. I appreciate her continued participation. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Tim? What are your reactions?
I mean, I didn't come out here to represent black people or white people. I'm not trying to represent anything. I'm merely making statements of observation about statements that were put in front of me. I'm not trying to represent African Americans because that's a lost cause. I'm not trying to represent white Americans because neither one of those groups exist. I'm merely making statements of observation about facts that were presented to me. And the facts in this case are that, like what you said, the mere thoughts accumulate to build beliefs. Events don't have to. So the mere thought of it and thing about black people made it distasteful for an entire contingent of people. I didn't say group. I said contingent of people. So I don't think there's any question that the racial component to this is clear. You know, the opposition to young African Americans being paid for being the best at what they do
right.
is under scrutiny by those who control the purse strings, you know, and why shouldn't they be paid? Why shouldn't they be remunerated? Why shouldn't they share in the revenue stream that they create? Because they're black. Why didn't Angel Reese and that amazing team and that amazing coach get any recognition for the amazing journey that they took? Because they're black, you know, and Caitlin Clark is white. So I think the racial element is cut and dry. It's pretty clear. And I'm not trying to represent black people. I consider the vast majority of black people the walking dead, you know, because of apathy and lack of concern and lack of recognition of these exact things.
Another thing that is highlighted for me in this conversation, Tim, when you talked about the purse strings, what resonated for me is that the people we're talking about who have resentful attitudes towards Black athletes getting money for their name, image, and likeness, these are people who themselves participate in capitalism and will die on a hill, the minute you mention anything that has to do with redistributing of wealth or taxing the rich or abolishing the billionaire class, right? Like, or even a living wage, even a conversation about a living wage or getting student loans paid back. Well, if you don't want to pay back your student loans, or if you can't afford it, then you need to get a better job, right? It's the apathy. And in so far as it is apathy, it is also protecting capitalism, right? It's saying, well, if the market doesn't justify you getting this money, or if you can't make money doing this job, or if you went to college and majored in this and now you can't get a job, well, that's your own fault, right? And then you have Black athletes who then cash in on their talent that they earned, that they worked for, that they grinded for. The market dictates that they can be paid this contract, this NIL deal, whatever it is, right? Like the market has dictated that this is what my name, image, and likeness is worth. And now you're telling me that I don't deserve this money. So it isn't even about, for some people, Tim, it's not even about capitalism, because these athletes are participating in capitalism and they still can't catch a break, right?
No.
They still can't catch a break. And it's because they are young, Black, gifted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And young, Black, and gifted.
And educated, right? These are Black boys and girls that are going to college and making a hell of a lot of money at the same time. And that is, I can speak from experience, that is one of the most frightening prospects for me and my people. It is a young, educated, wealthy, talented Black man or woman. And I think that's manifested in these survey results.
I think you're right. It's mind-boggling that you do everything you're supposed to do, everything they tell you to do from day one. Work hard, stay focused, practice, discipline, work on your talent, work on your jump shot, work on your hook, crossover, everything you're supposed to do to reach the pinnacle of your profession. Mm-hmm. And you still don't deserve it just because you're Black. Yeah. Just because you're Black, not because you committed a crime, not because you cheated somehow, you're a legacy hire or a legacy induction, or you got onto the team because your uncle is the coach. None of that. Mm-hmm. You didn't start on second base like so many people do. You worked hard, you did everything you were supposed to do, and you still don't deserve it because you're Black. Yep. That's not a statement of opinion. That's a statement of empirical fact. And we can see it every day. You can work 10 times harder in the United States to achieve the exact same result, or perhaps even a little bit less, as a person who's considered to be a member of the Black race or the Black racial or ethnic group. I mean, and then, I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody. I'm just illustrating how it is. This is how it is in the United States.
Right.
That's how it is. And I'm not saying everybody's like this. I'm not saying this whole group of people is like this. I'm saying that there is an overwhelming contingent of people who are white supremacists in their thought process. And I'm not just talking about white people. You don't have to be white to be a white supremacist. White supremacy is an affliction of the mind, not an affliction of your skin. I saw somebody else mentioning Black on Black racism. I'm sorry I wasn't able to read the entire quote, but yeah, you can be a racist as a Black person. You can be a racist as a white person, Chicano, Chinese, Puerto Rican, Pacific Islander, Indian, what have you. It's a mental affliction, and that's what we're looking at. Is the mental and spiritual and emotional afflictions of white supremacy and bigotry and hatred. You know?
And that race, when you talk about people other than whites being racist, we also need to be clear that there isn't such thing as reverse racism, right? Like all the racism benefits white supremacy in the end, even on the surface. When you think that it made black on black racism, one black person discriminating against another black person, or a black person discriminating against a white person. If we were to follow that through to its conclusion, and we won't do that now, but if you follow any thread of so-called racism through to its conclusion, the ultimate benefactor is always white supremacy. Even if you start in a place where it looks like white people are the ones losing out, if you follow that policy, that behavior, that attitude all the way through to its conclusion, the ultimate benefactor is always white supremacy, because racism is white supremacy, right? Like that's what we're talking about when we say racism. Race exists in this country only insofar as whiteness is at the top of the racial hierarchy, which is why Tim said before, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, which is why we agree that race is an illusion. It only exists to oppress, to divide, right? And so that's I think an important distinction, so that people don't get the impression that we're saying that there's such thing as like reverse racism. Sure, people can be hurt by bigotry, people can be impacted by racism. Ultimately, the benefactor is always white supremacy.
Always. I mean, I think if I'm here, with a brown paper bag, holding it up to my sister's face, saying, "Oh, you're darker than this bag. You can't get in this sorority," you know, that benefits white supremacy. That you know, and if I'm here bashing somebody because of the color of their skin or the texture of their hair or the color of their eyes as a black person, or if I'm up here pulling some of this Black Sambo stuff that so many black people pull on social media and on television and on these high-powered pundits, you know, playing these race cards and sowing this racial division. You know, my thing is I'm not here to choose a side. I'm not here to say black people are oppressed and white people are responsible. No, I'm not coming with that. What I'm coming with is we live in an age-old bastion of white supremacy and bigotry and racism. And I'm just pointing those things out. These things do drive a lot of factors in American society. They drive a lot of things. And you know, you know, I've traveled the world and I've experienced other cultures, and I know, you know, for a fact that it's not always about black and white everywhere you go. But in the United States, it's a real thing. My wife's son, born and raised in Belize, he says, a woman said this to me the other day. My son, born and raised in the United States, says a white woman said this to me the other day. Both the women were white, but only one instance was the race or so-called race mentioned. That's because in the United States, it is a real thing. It has weight, it has dimension, it has definition, it has substance, it has mass in the United States. You can't escape it, because before I am anything, you said it yourself, I'm an African American. I don't identify with too many things African, but that's what I am in this country. I can't just be an American. I got to be African first. I got to be black first. I have to be classified within one of these non-existent, fictitious racial groups before I can be correctly categorized in America. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Well, to that point, let's look at this last particular question that we have. I know we are just about out of time. But I think where we're going with the conversation I think will fold nicely into this last question. So among all professional sports, the two in which Black athletes are most strongly represented, football and basketball, have the highest age limits. To what extent is this an issue of race? And so here's what we're talking about when we talk about those age requirements. We can see from this table that going into the NBA, you have to be 19. To play in the NFL, you have to be 3 years past high school. But look at football. And by football, what I mean is soccer. Or even look at track and field or tennis. I mean, 14, barely into your teenage years, it's possible for one to turn pro. In major leagues, which is one of the major sports, Major League Baseball, you can be drafted right out of high school and sign a pro contract for sometimes millions and millions of dollars right out of high school. But yet that's not the case in the NBA, and it's definitely not the case in the NFL. So I'm wondering the extent to which you think that race is at play here, Tim. Yeah, what's your sense of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I pondered this for a good long while, and I can understand why they would want a more physically developed individual to play in the NFL, because that's big bodies smashing against big bodies, people knocking each other down, and so I could understand that you wouldn't want a 16-year-old trying to run up in the NFL combine. Same thing with the NBA. You have to have a certain height, and I don't think you'd have that at 16 or 17. I don't know. But I know the bias is there. I'm looking at the bias. It's right in front of me, emboldened in red. But I can't fully understand why. I can't fully understand why, other than the physical attributes necessary to play in those two sports. I mean, if I'm devil's advocate there, then I guess that's what it is. But I don't know. Do you have a better interpretation? Because I'm kind of stumped on that one. I mean, I see the bias.
Yes,
I don't
yes.
know what it's about.
Here's something to consider, Tim. This ban, for many years, high school players could go directly into the NBA. In fact, one from Chicago, Kevin Garnett, is among the best known players to go directly from high school into the NBA. The other one, though, probably the best known of them all, is Kobe Bryant.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin Garnett, he made the jump in, I believe it was 1995 or 6. And Kobe Bryant made the leap a year or two later. The ban on high school players going directly into the NBA was in 2006. Mm-hmm. And around that time in the NBA, Tim, was a very, and in society, there's a very strong, a deeply held perception that NBA players were thugs. And I'm using that word carefully and intentionally, because this was the era of Allen Iverson and tattoos and sort of like the coalescence of hip hop culture and basketball culture. Allen Iverson and his cornrows. Kobe Bryant was coming off of his rape charge. This was around the same time that Steve Nash, now take nothing away from Steve Nash. He's a point guard, white point guard who played for the Phoenix Suns for most of his career. He won back-to-back MVPs. Now, I'm going to tell you now, as someone who's watched and played basketball almost my entire life, Steve Nash is a terrific player. He had no business winning the MVP awards back-to-back. If we want to give him one, okay, fine. But there was a year there where Kobe Bryant was clearly the best player in the NBA, but he was coming off of this, embattled in this rape charge.
Yeah.
And just a year, I believe it was a year before 2006, was the Malice in the Palace, where the Indiana Pacers and Detroit Pistons got into a huge fight that involved fans, because fans were throwing things at the players and attacking the players and everything. Mm-hmm. You have this coalescence of a lot of different things, right? You have Kobe Bryant and the rape charge. You have Allen Iverson and hip hop culture and the cornrows and the baggy clothes then you have the Malice in the Palace. I mean, there's so many different things happening in the country at this time. This rule, I can't help it. I don't have any proof of this whatsoever. But I can't help but think that this was a reaction to the perception of young Black professional athletes around that time in our society and in our country. Again, no proof about it, but it's something that is now top of mind as I think about it a little bit more. Do you remember what's your memory of that time, Tim, or what's your reaction to any of that?
I remember when Allen Iverson and you know, when that phenomenon was taking place, and you know, there was always some controversy about the tattoos and, you know, things like that. But I never tied the two together in that respect. I know that if anything to maybe anything to delay the ultimate goal of these young men. I don't know, anything to postpone success for these young men. I don't know. Because this one I just can't grasp why the bias is there. I see it, but I don't know why. And you know, maybe it just escapes me, you know.
Well,
but I know
okay.
that.
But think about it like this, though, Tim. Like, we just looked at that data set with NIL,
Yeah.
right? And so the mere idea of a young Black man getting a multi-million-dollar contract, right?
Yeah.
Like baggy, like, and just imagine like the most stereotypical image of a young Black man in 2006 with baggy
Yeah.
clothes and the cornrows. And I mean, so if this is the image that white America has of Black athletes, I mean, it's the same idea, right? It's the
I would agree with
opposition
that.
to NIL, and it's an opposition to talented Black athletes making a leap from high school directly. Like, it's the same stream of or psychology of white supremacy, I think, operating in a different way. But I think it's taken this conversation in the way that we've unpacked things for me to make that connection back to what was happening.
Yeah.
when this ban was instituted on players making that jump.
Yeah, and it does go back to these young, successful, talented people not deserving what they've earned for whatever reason. Maybe because your hair is too long. Maybe you got too many tattoos. Your clothes too baggy, pants sagging. You don't deserve this. You have to wait another year before you can get it. It doesn't make sense. They're still going to get it. You know what I mean? But maybe not. Maybe something will happen. Maybe in that delay, you know, some way, shape, or form, something will happen to these guys that prevent them from attaining the success that they've worked so hard for. My dad used to say it's a process of elimination. Any way that you could choose to eliminate someone, then you try to go that route to try to eliminate whoever it is that you oppose, you know. So it could be part of it, you know. But I know that any obstacle, any barrier, any barricade, any stumbling block, any pitfall that could be thrown in the way of a so-called African American is gonna be thrown in there. I mean, you know, you can pretty much expect that there's gonna be something thrown out there, be it, you know, some derogatory statement about your history, culture, or heritage in front of everybody else to try to get you to go off. You don't know what it's gonna be. I'm an old soldier. I used to say they would be throwing hand grenades at me, you know, trying to get me to kind of go off in public and, you know, let my so-called Negro out, you know. Anything that they can do. When I say they, I'm not talking a general group or anything like that, but anything that the powers that be, in whatever situation you find yourself, can do to hinder your progress as a so-called African American, that's gonna happen, and it's gonna be based on some white supremacist garbage. And if your supervisor is a Black person that don't like dreadlocks, guess what? You know, the Supreme Court says you can be discriminated against based on that hairstyle. Why? Because the Supreme Court said so. So, if you are somebody black and your name is LaQuisha and you don't get the job because the human resources director doesn't know how to pronounce your name and doesn't want your name floating around on the payroll, that's what's going to happen.
Right.
I think
and so even to synthesize all of these threads, think about it like this, right? Like, okay, I don't want you, highly successful black athlete, to go to the NBA. So go to college, right?
Yeah.
I will not allow you to make the jump from high school to the NBA because you are not mature enough. You are not upstanding enough. You are not moral enough. You do not meet my standards, right?
Yeah.
But now that you're in college, you also can't make money there either.
No.
I don't like the name, image, and likeness, right? Like, I don't want you profiting off of your own name, your own body, even in college, right? So the issue isn't actually with the NBA. It's not actually with the college. It's with the person. It's with the skin color, right? It's the implicit or sometimes very much overt bias, hatred, animosity towards the black body, right? Like that's what it is in any case, man. So it's interesting that we've made it to this place and we've sort of tied these things together in that way.
Yeah, and it's not just athletics. It's
it's
not just athletics. I mean,
right.
Navy Federal is being sued because they won't give mortgages to black people. They wouldn't refinance black people's houses when the interest rates were extremely low and all that. And the same things happen with Wells Fargo.
I was just gonna say,
you can't. The United States is a special kind of sick, and it's right here in front of us. And I think we can rationalize it all we want to. We can say it's a numbers game. We can say it's about money. We can say whatever we want to, but I think the facts really speak for themselves. There's nary been a peep about the winning team in the NCAA championship this year. Back to where we started. There's nary been a peep, a story, nothing about that winning team. And these are people who did everything that they were supposed to do and reached the pinnacle of where they were supposed to reach. And because they are black people and Caitlin Clark is not, they have received no accolades, no press, no recognition for anything that they did. And I think, that's the epitome of having to work 10 times harder for less of a result in the United States, as a person of a color. You know what I mean? It's well, it's obvious, stop it.
Yeah.
Leave it alone.
My brother, I think this is a good place for us to stop for the evening. It's been a wonderful conversation as always.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, always a pleasure building with you. And for those that are still with us, I'm hope that you enjoyed the conversation, and I'm grateful that you spent time with us. We'll be back on May 8th. If you don't yet follow our 360 Collective Facebook page, make sure to do that so you can stay up with all of our posts, all the commentary that we offer there, and also track our upcoming discussions. That's what we do. We have these discussions to learn from the audience, to share our insight and our experiences with the audience, and to build together. So we hope you've taken something from this conversation, and we will see you on May 8th.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate it.
All right. Real Powers people.